Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Coming on Power Talk, thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And had such a good time with this cat yesterday, we decided to do it again. John Scofield, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you.
You know, I wanted to ask you, I just found this quote. I wanted to read it to you. This guy said, I was in a band with Alan Pasqua and Anton Fig, Gary Valente, and Ed Schuller. I learned a lot of stuff from my peers. My first ensemble at Berkeley had Kenny Warner and John Scofield in it. Lovano was in Berkeley at the time. George Garzone, Jerry Brigante, Abe Laboriel was in town. Those people were very influential because they were all really serious. And that was my interview with Tony DeGrati. You knew Tony at that time?
Yes, right.
That first ensemble, you guys were serious cats, man. I mean, that was the thing. I mean, can you talk about that first ensemble, your memory of it?
Well, I don't remember it, but I remember Tony, and we were all in school together, and all those people he mentioned, you know, Joe Lovano, Billy Drews, Kenny Werner, you know, and you know, we were all at Berkeley at the same time, and we all wanted to learn how to play jazz, and we, you know, listened to jazz records. Like I said before, we had the jazz workshop down the street, which had all of the great bands of jazz playing there for 6 nights a piece, you know, and that was so it was yeah, we were serious.
Well, I want you to just explain, if you can, when you say you were learning, what do you think it means to learn to play jazz? What do you have to master? Is it knowing the American songbook? Is it being able to leave the head of the tune and go out and come back? What is your standard as it relates to playing jazz?
Well, yeah, you have to, you know, it gets really simple in that a lot of musicians were like, that guy can play, oh, that guy can't play. And it's a matter of personal taste, you know. Mm-hmm. But for me and for anybody who actually plays an instrument and takes up the study of music, it's just trying to learn, and it's no different from any other discipline. You just put in the time and you'll get the results. And when I say jazz, it probably means something different to a lot of different people.
What does it mean to you?
Well, it doesn't, Jake, it doesn't mean anything. I can't say it in words, you know, and I don't want to try and do that because that limits it. And I think, you know, I'm not into that thing of saying what is and what isn't jazz. You know, there's stuff that I like and stuff that I don't like. But, you know, we were trying to learn tunes, which means stuff coming from the American Songbook. The really important stuff to everybody then, and still really, I think a lot now, was the bebop language that Charlie Parker and Bud Powell and all started. And that just progressed through, but so that was 1972 at Berkeley, or 70. And you know, by then it had progressed 25 years, and now it's been another 35 or whatever. And you know, the music that came after that, and then you learn about the music that came before that.
That's
from
right.
the swing era and everything. And you know, I mean, and then you know, musicians they just jump around all over the place. Like, you learn this song, you learn that song, you learn this lick, this phrase, and then when you get into jazz, you listen to it enough, you realize that people are constructing music, you know, off the cuff, which is something that's really hard to explain, but it's a lot like language. I think that we have a vocabulary, and we learn phrases and we use them, and sometimes you actually make some sense when you communicate speaking, and that's the same thing with a musical vocabulary.
No, I love
And
it. Yeah, no, I mean, Stanley Clark talked to me about Sonny Stitt. You talked about that bebop language, and the thing that those guys had was that they had it so ingrained in them that they could just riff off the cuff. They had the language totally instilled in them. So
that's what, Jake, I think that's what everybody wants to do.
right.
And Sonny Stitt and those guys were master players, and that's what everybody's trying to achieve, is to have the vocabulary so you can say something with it, and yeah, it's interesting, because we bebop and everything. Then you listen to this little different vocabulary, the swing era, and Lester Young and Roy Eldridge, and that's a little different. But that's, you can't really formalize what any of it is. You can't really say this is what that is.
Absolutely not. I'm just trying to figure out where you were. I know you were a garage rock band guy playing blues, and that's all I'm trying to figure out is when you guys were learning.
Well, Jake, I'm a guitar player. Anybody who started playing guitar in 63, rock was it. I've never really met anybody my age anyway, or in roughly in my time period, who didn't start out with rock and roll. I mean, maybe if you were a saxophonist or a pianist, you got right into jazz, but I mean, you're just learning how to play an instrument. You learn Louie, I mean, the basic chords, and I feel really lucky to have started out with rock and roll because it led me to jazz. It was like they're, jazz is the teacher, funk is the preacher. People say that stuff. There's this relationship between American popular music and jazz that's very, very close.
And just you caught my attention there. Just contemporary American popular music, because jazz was popular music at one time, right? I mean, it all kind of.
I mean, that's what, if you remember, Phil Woods said. We just called it music. I guess
it's simple times. I love that, man. Love
1952. Look at the pop charts. Everything was swinging.
I want to go a little bit deeper. We have a name that voice. I know you're going to know who this is, but just listen to what he's talking about, and then we'll come back.
Yeah. Completely creating music within the music. You have structures, you have little sequences of changes and harmonies, and there might be a certain tempo that something somebody plays might suggest, and to listen to records is one thing, but when you're in a room with the music, it affects you in another kind of way too. I was never in a room with the Miles Davis band that you're speaking on. With Wayne and Tony Williams, Ron Carter, and Herbie. But now through the years, I've played. The only one I never played with was Tony Williams, but I played with Ron Carter. I've played with Wayne and Herbie, and it's something when you're sharing the space with someone, and not just playing at the same time, but trying to create some music together. And all of that is a spiritual thing. Like the John Coltrane Quartet, we could listen to those records over and over again, and we're captured completely. But I was never in the room with that quartet. That would have been a whole other thing for me in my development. Right. But I played a lot with McCoy and a lot with Elvin. And that teaches you a lot of things about that Sufism, about the spiritual side of things.
Yeah, you got it. That was my interview with Joe Lovano. I just wanted to ask you. You touched on something yesterday that was very interesting. I wanted to, because he was talking about how much he was affected by he got a chance to see Keith Jarrett's quartet with Dewey in Cleveland, and what they were doing with tonality, And you mentioned like being in New York and sort of really wanting to get into that, Woody Shaw, Bobby Hutcherson groove. They were doing something at the Vanguard, and then ultimately, Billy found you and recruited you for that fusion thing. Is it? Can you? I know we're not in a formula trip here, but is there a way to talk about what Bobby and Woody and Keith were doing tonally with the music? I mean, for a non-musician, I can't really put it into words, but it's very modal. I don't even want to go that. You can riff on that any way you want. Is there a way to talk about what those cats were doing?
That was modern jazz, Jake. Everybody's got their different personality, but it's all modern jazz, and those guys we're talking about, Woody Shaw and Bobby Hutcherson and stuff. I see those guys as right after Coltrane's group. They were influenced by that so heavily, and by Miles and his different music. So they were influenced by bebop and everything too, but it was later, that. So when me and Joe Lovano were listening to the bands in the early 70s, and I just dropped a couple of names, but we checked out everybody, but the mainstream jazz thing was this, I don't know how to say it except for it was post free jazz.
Yes.
Guys that still played in time, and a lot of times the tunes would have changes, or they'd be modal, or but I mean, it was mainstream jazz, and that's not a kind of jazz. I'm just talking about what was happening with the good musicians in jazz in 1972, and that affected all of us. If we were trying to learn how to play jazz or love jazz and wanted to get a piece of it.
Did you have opportunities to play with have you had opportunities to play with anybody in that Miles Davis?
I played with all the guys in Miles Davis's group.
With Tony too?
One time or another. Yeah, I played with Tony on a couple records with Tony, and I played some gigs with him. It was wonderful, Actually, the first time I played with him, look, I was a Tony Williams fanatic, and went to shows and everything.
Sure.
The first time I heard him was one of my, high school adventures going into Slugs, and heard him with John McLaughlin and Larry Young when they had first put their group together in a little tiny club. That was something else.
You took Metro North into the city and went to Slugs to see.
It was called the New Haven Railroad at the time.
I love the New Haven. Dude, it was so innocent, beautiful, rolling hills, and very innocent, no urban.
Yeah, but we were close to New York in that my dad took the train every day into the city to work. He worked at Mobile Chemical,
Wow.
And
cool.
And so, we were in the outer reaches of New York suburbia. So yeah, took the train, went to the first set, it was in the summer of 69 maybe. The sun was still out during the first set. I remember that. And,
wow.
yeah, but anyway, I played with Tony. Later on, Mike Knock, who was funny that you talked about him yesterday. He had a lot of gigs at Sweet Basil, and he used Al Foster and Tom Harrell and me and a really good bassist named Herb Bushler.
Oh, the man, dude. Ridiculous bass player.
One night, Al Foster couldn't make it, and Mike knew Tony, and he invited Tony to come play the night with us, and Tony was in town, and he came down and played the gig.
Well, it's funny because I've done a couple interviews with Knock, and he talked about being embraced by the cats when he got to Harlem. Sam Rivers and Tony, their relationship went way back. Did you?
I bet Mike went to Berkeley, right?
He absolutely went to Berkeley. Yeah, okay. He was in that original.
I bet he met Sam and Tony in Boston.
That's exactly what it was. And I just can't remember the year exactly, but that's where their friendship, and they played a lot at that time.
Yeah, because he's been around long enough, so I'm pretty sure he went to Berkeley when Sam and Tony were still Boston based because they're both from there, or they both lived there in that period.
I mean, this is before it gets out of my head. I'm working on memoirs with Johnny Vodakovich, and he talks. I mean, he loves you. He talked about Tyler's Beer Garden. Do you remember going to New York? I mean, there was a lot of partying going on, but can you talk about how you connected with Johnny?
Okay. Yeah. Yes. I've always been a fan of jazz from New Orleans. My mom's from New Orleans. And she went to high school with Louis Prima. And although my parents were not by any means jazz people, right. I was aware, because just in the air, that Dixieland, what they call Dixieland music, came from New Orleans. So I was always into New Orleans, and the fact that my mother's family, that I had uncles that still lived there, aunts, and all, so I was in New Orleans. And then first time I actually got to play there was with Billy Cobham. And then I went out and, went to Bourbon Street, and there were these, and I started to hear, and somebody told me, the Meters, who I knew about, were from New Orleans, and I liked their hit song, Sissy Strut.
Sure.
And then I started to just be told by people that all this great R&B that I liked came from New Orleans and had a different kind of groove than the other R&B. This is old stuff from the 50s, Of
course.
Come on, let me show you where it's at, Chris Kenner and all. And so I was into New Orleans R&B. I already into it. And then it was about 1980, I would imagine, 79 maybe. A guy was putting on shows in New Orleans, and he would bring soloists from New York or wherever down and play with a local rhythm section. And he brought me, his name was Jonathan Rose, and he brought me down to play at Tyler's Beer Garden with Johnny Vodakovich and Jim Singleton on bass, Johnny Vodakovich on drums. And it was a revelation to me, because we'd never played together. I was just, we have to do this gig. So we kind of played standards, right?
Right.
And I remember when we played Freedom Jazz Dance, Johnny put a different thing on it than any of the jazz, rock, whatever drummers I played with. And he was playing this New Orleans kind of drums. And Johnny and I became friends, and I just learned so much from him. And I'll never forget the times I got to go. I went down a few times, and we would play for a week each time, and I would hang. And there was a lot of partying going on.
There was but he also, I think, said that at a certain point after a gig, you guys went and recorded some stuff. I don't know if that even.
Once we went to Houma, Louisiana.
Yes, that's where you went. That's it. It was out. I mean, dude, it was like 6 a.m. You go like 2 or 3. Unbelievable.
I guess so. We went to some studio in this other town.
That's exactly where you went.
That a friend of his, had a studio. Yeah. And I don't know. We were like stayed up for days. Yeah.
It was those times. I mean, when you so your mom was from there, but you actually never visited New Orleans until you went.
Yeah, I visited as a kid, and visited my uncles and aunts. I have vivid memories of being in New Orleans.
Wow, that is beautiful. Because I mean the late great John Hendricks told me, without the Sicilians, there would be no jazz in America. That's basically they were the ones that ran these clubs. I mean, again, I don't want to get into birthplaces of jazz and this and that, but I mean, New Orleans is.
I think it's the birthplace of jazz.
I think you're right. I mean, I think
from what I've been told.
Yeah, well, I mean, some people would say Harlem, but to me, like being in New Orleans, you had these. Bases, and then you would have these. But ultimately, I mean, what John said was that the Sicilians, pardon my French, he said they didn't treat us like niggers. He said they recognized our genius, they paid us for our craft, and they liked our vibe, and that's where there were a lot of clubs. I remember him saying that in, I think, Akron, it was Ohio was a dry state, so they'd run liquor down to these waiters and bellman's clubs, and him and Count Basie and people like that be swinging all night. I mean, it really was. It was big. That's what Liebman said to me, and you were part of it. Is that to me, jazz, even through the 70s, was still a black subculture, and I mean that the lore of it today speaks to this incredibly amazing music. But I don't even know if I would have been hip enough to even be on the scene, man. To me, it's like one of the coolest times in American history that you lived through.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, look, it's I have been lucky enough to have black friends and know black musicians since I was a teenager and stuff. But I'm pretty much from the white suburban world, and I think jazz, because it was popular music, it became it was kind of black musicians depended on a white audience, that's for sure, in order to get by since the beginning. We all live in here together, and so I feel just really lucky that I was around some people and got to culturally appropriate black
That's
music.
right. That's right.
And that's what I've done, but I've also, if you really look at it, just sitting down and playing an instrument, you're appropriating some sort of sound and trying to make something happen. And sometimes it's country, sometimes it's classical. You play a string, you got something to do with the Indo-European chain, man. You just do if you're playing a string.
I dig.
And yeah, I
But I guess what I'm trying to get at with my younger peers, especially, like everyone that I've talked to, the guys that were white, that had the balls to go in and play, and but they used to say, I mean, they were totally accepted by the Black Hats. There was never any bad vibe.
I felt only love from
that's what it
black
is. Yeah.
musicians,
Yeah.
because and I only good. Never had any bad experiences, actually, to tell you the truth. Nothing.
That's amazing. But that speaks to your. I mean, that's amazing that nobody ever yelled at you or like tried to get.
Oh, I got yelled at, but I didn't get yelled at because I was white. I got yelled at because
Right.
I was playing the wrong chord.
I did. No, I did. Yeah, no, I love it. I just, this, I don't. This is from my interview with Ross James, who was a great guitar player out in San Rafael, and he said,
Oh, I know Ross.
yeah, and he said, I've learned so much, if not more, from the gigs that I've gotten to watch. When Terrapin first opened, Brian Lesh and I were doing audio and video for the webcast. I mixed a bunch of shows there. We were there every gig. A lot of times we'd be playing in the bar during the set break. We'd go over and watch Scofield and Warren Haynes play and feel inspired and energized and charged up, and then we'd go and apply what we'd just seen. We were playing Unbroken Chain with Phil, and I remember afterwards talking to Scofield about the jams in that song, because there's a 2-part jam with 2 different signatures, and I was picking his brain about the downbeat, and he said, well, quoting John, there's always another one coming around. I think about that all the time. And that is something that I am so fascinated with, and it comes out of, well, I mean, in some ways, you had this idea of 4 on the Floor going back to, more, sort of trad jazz kind of stuff. And then ultimately, what Joe was talking about in that clip I played earlier, he talked about, these Plug Nickel sessions where Miles's band, they basically left the head of the tune and, sort of broke up time and form and then came back in together. And it was very beautiful. And then you could apply that to jam bands, bands like the Sons of Champlin or the Grateful Dead, and so I wanted to get your concept of the idea that any note can be the one.
I don't know if that is my concept.
Well, no, you riff any way you want.
I
I mean, that's just what I'm saying is I love.
I mean, I'm not sure what the one means, but I mean, I think what I was trying to tell Ross was, that we get lost, because this is playing odd time signatures,
Exactly.
which is something I'm not an expert in, but it wasn't 4/4 or 3/4. It was like 7 or 5 or something where you keep the beat, and it's kind of, you can't tap your foot to it in the same way as you can to most dance music, and by dance music, I mean anything in 4/4. And I was just trying to tell them, well, there's always you're not going to get that lost because you just listen and it'll come back around. That's what I was trying to say to Ross, I think.
No, absolutely. You said there's always a 1, meaning the downbeat coming around again. But I just,
that's what I meant.
So, I mean, can you talk about, like, by the way, I just went to the store yesterday and found Funky Thide of Sings, and
oh my God,
really checking out, loving, just, the band was wickedly fierce. I mean, it just sounds ridiculous, but can you talk about when you first had to play in odd meters and how, and that whole concept of just maybe collectively the band goes out in a live setting and you lose the downbeat, but then, ultimately you come back in together.
Well, yeah, we can do that, but there's a whole lot of stuff that people do that I think goes over people's heads when we're playing and they think we've lost a downbeat, what we haven't.
We'll talk about that. I mean, please.
And that's part of this whole jazz thing right back from, certainly bebop was, being able to improvise with the rhythm,
Totally.
and the rhythm is paramount. And Sonny Rollins, I remember in an interview, they asked him what the most important thing was in his music. And he said, the rhythm. And this is like probably one of the most wonderful melodic musicians ever, Sonny Rollins. But, just obscuring you're playing stuff over it. It's interesting, it becomes a kaleidoscope. And then the more you know about it, where you can keep the beat and say, oh, that's what they're doing. And then, guys got into a thing of where they actually let it go. And they played, like, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, you might think of it as 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1.
That's it. That's what I'm talking about.
And I'm sure a lot of people, sometimes me too, can't tell the difference. And I don't know if you have to know the difference, but what this is just improvising with the rhythm. And they talk about polyrhythm, and the very beginning of the jazz thing, dun 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 dun. That's 1, 2, 3. Well, no, I was thinking, is that 3/4? 1. No, it's not. But the idea of playing a 3-note pattern, that's the Charleston beat, which is the original syncopation, I think.
Wow.
Or one of them. But the idea of playing 3/4, which is odd over even. If the music's going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, dang ching chang, dang ching chang, dang ching, dang ching ching, dang ching ching, dang ching. That's dividing up 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, which comes out to 8. But you could look at that as an intellectual thing, but you can learn to feel it really quickly. Pa 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 pa. And then when you internalize that, then you're syncopated, and that's sort of thing can just keep going and going and going until people have all kinds of rhythms inside them that they're able to improvise with, but they don't have to think about it.
Absolutely, dude, you're making my day, dude. This is, I mean, did you? It's fair to say that you were with DeGrady and those cats. I mean, you were learning to play jazz. The first time you really encountered that ability to dance and play in one, and Do you think it was with Billy, or when did you think you really took on the odd metered stuff?
Well, no, I mean, I never really got into the odd meter stuff that much because you can put odd meters over 4/4.
Interesting.
And then to me, it just makes perfect sense because there's all this beautiful, complicated rhythm over a dance beat. And when I say dance beat, I mean just an even thing. And that's what Coltrane and Elvin, for certain Elvin Jones and all the great jazz guys did. And that's pretty much enough for me. But I do enjoy playing like in 5 and 7, and I've done it some. I do it recently playing with Dave Holland, but you know, and with Billy, we played odd time signatures. It's just never really been something that held my interest as much as using different rhythms in a set easy meter. Yeah.
So this is interesting because, you know, I listen to a lot of music, but in the car with my daughters, we listen to a lot of early 80s live Grateful Dead. And so Phil gets a lot of grief. I mean, I was having a drink with David Morgan, who was the bass player in Santana, and he was just talking about a lot of cats kind of look at Phil, and again, I think that Phil is the most adventurous, fearless cat, but you know, a lot of people say that he doesn't really well, he's just, you know, people would say he's soloing, he's playing so melodically, and, you know, it's not like you're in the pocket, Rocco Prestia, you know, sort of, you know, deep groove, funk, you know, or jazz, or, you know, that in the pocket. It gets sloppy in some ways. But, you know, Phil, I mean, the fact that, can you talk about how you met Phil and then ultimately what makes him, in my mind, such an amazing player? Because, I mean, I know he's coming at it from a non-traditional way, but you even hear people like, you know, Billy Kreutzmann saying, you know, like, or there used to be a joke, Phil had a side band. I don't know if you're hip to this. He kind of wants people to forget this, but in 1976, he had a band called Too Loose to Truck with Terry Haggerty from the Sons of Champlin, John Allaire, who's a great organ player, and Steve Mitchell, the drummer, rest in peace. And Steve used to look at Phil and say, hey, Phil, you know, we really need a bass player on this gig, you know, because Phil was just going off. And I just wanted you to talk, you know, in your mind about what it's like to play and how you've learned to play with Phil.
Well, I started playing with Phil. It's got to be
20 years or something?
About 20 years, yeah. And now this happened because of Warren Haynes. And I met Warren years ago. He came in, you know, I really don't know I was into rock in the 60s, you know, really into it. And I became a jazz musician and a jazz snob, you know, in like 1969, and I never looked back. So anything after that, I kind of missed. So
fascinating, because I was going to ask you if you went to see like Sly Stone. I'm trying to think of that club in Boston. Like, you know, if you saw this.
My Sly Stone, that changed my life. And, you know, hearing Sly, when they came, it was Dance and Music came out, and they came to a country club in Norwalk, Connecticut, and played in a ballroom. And I had only heard the song Dance to Music on the radio. I don't even think their albums had come out yet. And it was unbelievable in a small room how heavy they threw down.
Wow.
And I heard Jimi Hendrix, and I heard, you know, and that also blew my mind. And
did you go to the Fillmore East to see Jimmy? Or
I didn't see Hendrix there, but I went to the Fillmore East a bunch, and I heard the Dead. You know, I heard the Dead, the Fillmore, opposite Frank Zappa.
I knew this. So you also the Boston Tea Party? Were you going there at all?
Well, no, because when I went,
you were already a snob. You were rocking jazz. Yeah.
Then I became a jazzer. I didn't go to the Boston Tea Party. I went to the jazz clubs.
See, so you saw the Dead back in the formative years.
I saw the Dead on their first gig in New York at Tompkins Square Park.
Oh my!
And it was they had the opening band was the Blues Project, And I was a fan of the blues projects with Danny Kalb and Al Cooper
Steve Katz, the great
and
man.
Steve Katz,
Yeah.
and I liked those guys, and that's why I went. And the Dead just kind of didn't really register so much with me. But what mainly registered was whatever year that was, 67 maybe.
I'll look it up.
It was the beginning of the hippie thing. And I went to the East Village where I'd never been before. And there were all these guys with really long hair. And I was like, wait a minute, I just heard about long hair. You know, these guys had it down to their shoulders. I like, how long did it take them to grow that, you know?
I love June 1st, 1967.
Oh yeah, that's when it was. I remember.
Unbelievable. So yeah, it was bloom. It was full bloom with the freedom of expression, free love thing going on.
Yeah, well, in Wilton, Connecticut, it wasn't in
no doubt the country clubs were going on.
And it was, yeah, right. And it was in the city, you know. And no, but I went to a bunch of rock shows and everything. And okay, Phil, Warren Haynes, who I had met, he came in a club in New York when I was playing with Joe Lovano in the early 80s. And I didn't know who he was. He said, man, can I sit in? I said, no. Nobody's sitting in with our band. Are you kidding me? And then we started talking. He said, I'm in the Allman Brothers. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So then we started talking. I sort of felt bad, like, oh, this guy's a famous rock guy. But then I realized, well, wait a minute. I thought the Allman Brother died, and it was Dickie Betts. And then I realized he was the new guy. I mean, he'd probably been there for a while, but, you know, after Duane Allman died. And we became friends ever since. And then he's a wonderful guy and knows everything about music. And he told Phil to hire me. And sometimes I've played with Warren with that group. And Phil does a revolving cast. He has Phil Lesh and friends. And when he first started, he had the same group with Warren and Jimmy Herring. But then, you know, he disbanded that after a couple of years, I guess. And then he does this revolving door thing. And every year he calls me up for a few gigs. It's only a couple of gigs, but it's been a long time now. And he's really nice. He lets me read my chord charts of the Dead tunes. Because when I first joined him, I didn't know the Dead tunes. And now I do.
I love this. What is that? So talk about that. I mean, what was that like to learn those? What was it? Because a lot of the cats say, you know, how hard could it be? It's hippie music, but then there's some subtle stuff in there.
Yeah, and luckily, you know, when I play with Phil, there's like keyboards and another guitar player as well as Phil. So if I don't have it totally together, those guys do usually. And you know, Phil wants me there because I'm a jazz musician and because I can interact. And, you know, a lot of quote unquote rock and blues players, they don't know about that. You know, they don't, why would they? You know, they just interact on a sort of a subconscious level maybe, but they're not really like in love with what happens when people start to improvise together.
You're talking about
and Phil is too. Phil's the only rock star I've ever met who really wants it to go out.
I love it. I freaking love it, dude.
Yeah, he loves that.
Well, hold on, because I mean, the two dear friends. I want you. They're good friends of mine and fantastic. And I know there was this, you know, pre-COVID, the Scott Metzger and Tony Leone. Those guys can really play jazz too. That it must.
Yeah.
When you talk about just talking about again these subtle nuances of music, rock and blues, kind of they want to interact on a subconscious level, but taking it to the new level. You're talking about conversation music within the music. Is that fair to say?
You know, conversation. You know, I mean, they don't have to bother with that stuff. They work on different elements. You know. But one of the things that's interesting in, again, modern jazz and what's happened is this conversation thing that happens when you really listen to each other. And
I love it.
And that's something that Phil aspires to, you know. and it's really, really great on his part that he's looking for that, you know, in his music, in the Dead tunes, you know. And they always did it, right? Jerry and those guys were into that as well.
Well, they all just, I mean, that the urgency that they took. It's funny because the one show that we've been listening to nonstop is Frost Amphitheater '83, and here you are in May. You're going to be there, man. I mean, it's going to be right. I mean, is that right? You're playing with Phil there. I mean, the Frost Amphitheater is like, I mean, it's almost as far as playing with him as a bass player. Is it? Can you just talk about like what makes him a unique player?
Well, he does. Again, he's from an era when there wasn't maybe as much of an established way to play the bass.
Exactly.
So he just sort of came up with his own way, and he likes harmony. He likes to put in interesting other bass notes, and sometimes it'd be a different choice, and it really made some of those Grateful Dead tunes because you can't imagine them without what Phil would put in there.
What song has been most challenging for you from that?
None of it's challenging.
Okay, I dig.
It's okay. On one hand, I wouldn't. It's not about that. It's music is challenging, and to perform every night and to let it happen and to be part of it is sometimes it's easy, other times you don't have it, and it's not about the tunes. Because the tunes are, I mean, it's not like what we say, giant steps, or something. The tunes are it's not about that, and it's not supposed to be about that. Some of the songs have kind of long forms that you have to really, be like all the same for 3 minutes, and then the Dead put in a whole other section. So if you're not playing it every night, you wouldn't know that. But the challenge is trying to play creative music every night.
I dig completely. I have one more voice for you, man. Pay attention to the content. We'll come back.
I mean, with all of the different gurus and spiritual teachers I've been to see and meet and participate in their events, Coltrane was a profound spiritual influence on me, and still is to this day. Not just a musical influence, gigantic, but a gigantic spiritual influence. I mean, God bless him and all of for that he was born. My debt to him is so enormous. I will never be able to pay it back.
Could you talk about the? I mean, this is fascinating because
was that Santana?
You had that was well, we didn't. That was not the that you know who that was because he's got a mutt accent. That was my fourth interview with McLaughlin.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
And I got to send you these. I got to send you some of these interviews because I mean, dude, he talked.
He does have a. You don't know what's going on with his accent. Yeah,
it's totally out there.
John has been very, very nice to me. I'm sorry I didn't peg him.
Well, no, it's okay. You're cool. You were 3 for 4. It's pretty good in baseball. I mean, can you just talk about your spiritual muse in your life? I mean, some people. John went off the later part of that clip. He just talks about it took him over a year to learn what Train was doing on Love Supreme. And you were still really just, playing rock bars and, in Connecticut, New York border and stuff. But, there's just something about, you talk about playing creative music or even like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, incredibly complex music, but it's about the challenge is playing creatively. And I also just feel like there's something about, and John Molo, a dear friend, he talked to me about with accessing the primordial gut, taking it from the head to the heart into the soul. And I just kind of wanted you to talk about, if anything, how you've been, your spiritual compass. I mean, John McLaughlin was with Paul Motion at Sufi dances in '69 when you saw him at Slugs, in the Sufism. And I'm not saying you were off in India or anything, but have you, especially during some of the darker times, I mean, how do you believe you're still here, not just still here, but still playing prolifically today?
I kind of, I'm not sure how to address that because, I mean, the spirit around us from the different people and the animals that I love and my friends and my family, we're all need each other, and that's the most important thing to us, and to actually to all of us, so and music, music's just another thing that we do, but we're spiritual beings, I guess, that's what they say, right? But I don't think about that very much. I experience it, like every human does. Everybody, we all know something's going on, and with each other, and we need each other, and with the music, it's been so much a part of my life, and I love it so much. I love music, and it's created by humans,
Absolutely. Well, but not a lot in pop music. That's the thing. You desire human music, is what you say.
Well, that's, to me, that's all I ever knew.
Right.
This is all. Most of my experience is pre
drum machines and things like that.
Yeah. But automation. Although some of that I like too, but I'm not like the Mahavishnu Orchestra or it's much more abstract than that for me, and I don't really, I just play, and the more you play, the more it becomes this thing that you can do. I can play better than I can speak,
Absolutely.
and all musicians are like that. We have to be like that. We wouldn't be playing anything if we could speak better than we could play. That would, Steve Swallow, my friend, is one of the most articulate
genius
people I know, and he's just, somehow he just is that, but he plays even better than he speaks, and so I can't really give you a thing about spirituality because I feel like I'd be just, in a way, making something up to fit.
Absolutely. No, I mean you
and I don't want to go there. I'd rather leave that open, and so much of this stuff of the mysteries, and we don't really need to answer it. The thing about music is you just listen to it and you get it and you like it, or it goes past you and you're, that's not really getting me, That's about it.
And you know what, man, I love your authenticity, because what's funny is McLaughlin used to go, and I'm sure you saw the band. I mean, he would ask for complete silence, in these gyms, in these auditoriums, and it would get down to maybe an air conditioner somewhere, and then they'd bust into some crazy tune. And actually, Billy really drove him nuts that John did that. He's like, "We're here to play, man. Let's play the music." But can you just talk about, ultimately, a time in your life when you were facing a lot of adversity, how you overcame it, ultimately how it put you on a path towards just being a stronger person constitutionally? I mean, you're still, knock on wood, you're still incredibly prolific today. Can you just talk about overcoming adversity in a time in your life when you were fighting it, and how you got out of your own way?
It's I've had adversity, and it turns out we all will. And, we're actually going to die. Boy, that's some adversity right there. How are you going to deal with that?
Yeah, amen.
And then, I've just gotten through it with the help of my friends, of my wonderful family, my wife, and that seems to be the big thing that has helped me. And music is my friend. I'm lucky I have music because it's really interesting and it makes me feel good. And that's about it, Jay.
Well, no, it is. When I interviewed Gad, I mean, Gad literally lost everything. He had to leave the city. He had to go away. But then he said, once he cleaned up, he had friends in the business, and so he came back, and thankfully, music kept him alive. I mean, did you actually ever take a break from music, or have you just played?
No, I've always done music, and I quit getting high 20 plus years ago, and because I knew that it was over, and the bar was closed. It was the last call, and it really came close to losing a lot, but I never stopped playing. And I think that's the reason that I can still play and still have some semblance of sanity is that I did clean up. And yeah, so
yeah, no, we're all thankful for it. I mean, do you can you just talk about what's going on? I know I take it you're not going to Europe in April, but what kind of stuff do you have?
I'm going to Europe. I'm going to Europe in May, and I'm going to Europe in July, and
you said things are going to get busy next month. Can you just talk about a few things that you're excited about?
Well, I've got a solo record coming out.
Oh, beautiful!
A solo guitar on ECM. It's called John Scofield, and that's coming out in May. And I'm excited about that. I've never done a solo record before, and that was as a result of sitting home during the pandemic and the lockdown.
Absolutely.
And I've got a recording set up, to record my electric guitar, and I did it. And so that Manfred Eicher is nice enough to be putting that out. I'm touring with my new group, Yankee Go Home, with John Coward on keyboards, Vicente Archer on bass, and Josh Dion on drums. And we're kind of rocking out.
Wow.
And I wrote some music for that, and we're doing some covers, and we're doing some of the Dead tunes that I've learned from playing with Phil and some other rock classics that baby boomers will get all nostalgic. What I'm doing. But then we take them, we take them apart and use them as vehicles for jazz music.
This is what I'm talking. Wait, please tell me, are you doing a domestic tour with these cats?
Yeah, we're doing a bunch of dates coming up. We did a bunch of East Coast. I don't know, where are you?
Dude, can you come to Arizona, man? We're like the lonely stepchild.
No, we're playing in Phoenix.
At the Musical Instrument Museum, maybe?
Yes, we're playing at the
Dude, let's catch a hand.
Yeah. Well, it'll be great to meet you. We're playing there at the end of April. I don't have the date right in front of me.
I'm there, man. I'm there. That's going to be great, man. John, thank you so much, man, for putting in the time.
No, it was so much fun because I'll tell you, you got me when you knew about Link Chamberlain.
Yeah, that was the hook, man. That's the hook.
How did you know?
John, I'm 44. I've done this 11 years, 2,000 interviews. I mean, you run into everyone from Moondog to Harry Parch to John Scofield to Link Chamberlain. I mean, it's just, that's where it goes, man. And there's just.
But did somebody tell you that I knew Link Chamberlain?
No, the minute you said Connecticut, then I flashed to my interview with Spinoza, who talked about Link, and I said, I think Link's from Connecticut. That was the whole. It was all the spirit.
It just killed me that you know about that. There are actually people out there who knew Link and played with him. I never did, but that just brought me back to really being 13 years old, and that's why I'm, I was told by my elders back then that there's this kind of music that's like soul music that you like. It's another kind of black music, and it's even better, and that's called jazz.
Wow.
and there was this definite, line that went right from trying to play Kansas City on the guitar or High Heel Sneakers to A Love Supreme. And I still believe that.
That's my final question. I'm so glad you just said that, because there are these tunes that seem to cross over between the jazz realm and the blues realm, and I just wanted to ask you. I'm curious about you have some of the Jazz Crusaders tunes compared to what Les McCann. there were just these tunes that you hear, at least faux jazzers or guys that were more blues rock guys could actually. Freedom Jazz Dance was another one. What makes certain tunes translatable for cats that don't have a huge jazz vocabulary?
Well, you can just play the blues.
That's right. Okay, so it
You
all
can't
comes from the
play-
blues. Yeah.
You can't play just the blues over Giant Steps or over Satin Doll either. Which is a simpler jazz diatonic progression. And but you can find places to put the blues in Satin Doll and in any jazz tune that gives it the wonderful colors, and when you're like a rock guitar player and you hear Wes Montgomery for the first time or whoever, and then you hear, wait, there's some stuff that sort of sounds, just for a minute there, I kind of knew what he was doing, and then you make the connection.
I'll see you at the end of April, John. We'll be in touch, man.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, brother.
Take care.
Be cool, man.
Bye.
Later. Set 2 in the books with John Scofield. It's always a pleasure. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be back later. Until then, peace.